Welcome to Reconsider. I'm Bill Hartman. This is the podcast to challenge you to ask better questions, to look beyond traditional models of thinking and arrive at better health and fitness solutions.
So lots of people, I mean, we had thought people were going to be excited about this network thing, and we were right. And hundreds and hundreds of people are wanting to get in, are knocking down the doors, asking us. We see your comments. I think people are anxious that they think they're not being accepted because they haven't been let in yet. But
I had a question this morning about that. It's like everybody wants to know if they're going to get like a letter that tells them that they haven't been accepted.
You will. So just to make this clear, there is a possibility of being declined. We have declined several people at this point. If you put like single letters in for your name and you respond with one-word answers to all of the questions, you will be denied access to the. Yes. Like this isn't like. You're not going to call our bluff here and think that we're not actually going to read hundreds of applications, because
we are literally going to read hundreds.
Bill and I are
we're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. There are a lot of people that have applied, and thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. We appreciate you, but understand that it's going to take us just a little bit of time to get through these.
It's cool. Everyone's excited. Everyone kind of wants to like get in there and start, asking questions and discussing with the community. But and they also kind of want to just see what it's like. So I think what we're going to do today to begin the podcast is for anyone listening on Spotify or Apple, whatever, this would be a good episode to go to YouTube and watch, because we're going to show in the beginning here, we're going to show some of the what's going on the network. So right now, you're going to see the back end of the network. So this is the Mighty Networks program that we are using to run this network. And this is the back end administrative end, which will look very similar to what the user interface will look like. So we have all of our collections, which are the subheadings, and then the spaces are the places that go. So it's like the Mighty Networks is explained as sort of like a building with offices in a building, and that's what these things are. So we're going to have a main content forum. So this is the welcoming page that you'll see, which is the rules and some of the terminology that's used for the model to kind of help people on the front end. Then we'll have a content forum, which will have weekly articles that are posted by Bill. And then within those articles, so the first week it will already be up for everybody. This is the story of where the model comes from. And in the bottom of each of these posts will be a discussion section that people will be able to interact with each other, interact with us, ask questions, post emojis, such and such. Then we'll have learning spaces too, which are discussion sections that will be more context driven and topical. So it's like we have a general section for model questions and answers. We have a health end of the continuum discussion section. We have performance end. We have the Reconsider podcast, which will have the episodes posted in here with discussion sections. So you can go in and talk specifically about, so it's like, it's taking the YouTube comment section, but enhancing it so it can be way more interactive and create a thread that's actually searchable. One of the cool things about this is that certain topics that we talk about, you'll be able to actually search the entire network for based on either the search terms or hashtags that we'll create to sort of section things off. And then we'll have access to the coffee and coaches calls that Bill does are currently on Facebook. And slowly over time, we will shift all of those links to being only on the network. You'll be able to get your Zoom link, open it up through the network, and that will be your way to access that. And then we'll also be having, in this space, we'll be able to post past coffee calls and actually be able to follow up on questions and discuss things that happened. And that's currently something that doesn't exist, is coffee calls happen, Bill posts clips to the calls, and then it disappears. There's never really been a way to access the stuff after it's done. So that's cool. Right. And then some of the more exciting stuff, one of the main reasons we started doing this was to create sort of a practitioner's curriculum. And this is more of a curated video. So we've gone through Bill's archive of videos and created sort of a curated playlist for some of the main talking points of the model to be able to introduce it. So it's like, we call it the 101 courses. So intro to the model, structural constraints, breathing mechanics, axial skeleton mechanics, lower extremity stuff. And like all of this stuff will have text lesson materials, we'll have video lesson materials, and we'll also have some quizzes and follow-up stuff that we'll put in there. And then we're still building this stuff out, so we'll also have our practitioners courses here. Decision-making course will be, posted and will actually exist in a different website that we'll show at a later date, where the practitioners courses will live. It's called Thinkific. I won't get too much into that. And then we have a resources section, which will have like a networking area for people looking for ways to connect with others in their area, for practitioners to help them with certain things, for study buddies, for book swaps, all these sorts of things, help with patients and clients locally, and all that good stuff. And then we'll build out in the future forums specifically for the practitioners takecourses. And then another really exciting thing for anyone that's participating in the Recon program, we will also be taking the forum space for the app that we're currently using is not the greatest thing. It's kind of hard to search for things. It doesn't work as an effective of a way as we would like it to. So we're going to be moving everyone that's in the Recon program into the Mighty Networks UHPC network to be able to have, this would be a place where people can come in and learn more about the program, first of all. And then we'll have a private section only for people doing the program where they can access a FAQ section of the frequently asked questions. They'll be able to get access to us via the feed and the questions there. And it'll be a much better way to do it because you'll be able to search for terms and you'll be able to connect in a much easier way than is currently set up. But yeah, this is the basic rundown of what we've got going on. Nice. It's cool stuff. It's a little overwhelming for us on the front end, as it will be for, I should say, it's a little overwhelming for Bill on the front end.
I don't know. All of my technical wizardry has gone into this, right?
Yeah, Bill built all this, everybody. This is all Bill.
It's like, here's my technical wizardry right here.
Bill just kind of like, Bill very bashfully tried to hand me just a filing cabinet of index cards to see if I could do something with it.
Yeah. No, it's like without you, this would not happen. So I appreciate you, Chris. And then, like I said, I appreciate everybody that's already shown interest. And we're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible so we can get this thing rolling because I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, so this podcast will come out on Sunday, the 24th, right? Mm-hmm. And then you and I will start. The goal is to try to start letting people in on the 24th. I'm sure people that watch this will probably add a bunch of people to the list of hundreds and that we already have.
And we will read them all.
We'll start letting people in, and we'll start building this thing into what the community wants it to be. But yeah, it's going to be a cool thing. It's going to be overwhelming for everybody involved in the beginning, but we'll figure it out as we go and do that together. And the great part about it is, the first, I think, 8 weeks or so, it'll be totally free. So everyone that comes in will get just completely full, unadulterated access to everything. And it's going to seem like just this vast array of questions and content that you will have access to for free in the beginning. Yeah. So very cool. Yeah. Don't just want to shamelessly self-promote today. We want to actually talk about something. So on the topic of health and performance, the health and performance continuum, it's kind of something we haven't really talked about too much. separating
we've,
how the
we've
both.
we flashed it up a
Yeah.
little bit once or twice, but
Yeah,
yeah.
so I'm going to talk less, and I'm going to let you talk now about.
Do you have the little slide handy? By any chance?
Sure. Let me use my editing skills to pull up the.
Yeah.
I'll just share it on the screen. We'll cut that in here. Okay.
Awesome.
So yeah, take it away, Bill.
So. Let's look at the unique property of the continuum. So typically the continuum is represented as a straight line with the two extremes at the end. The thing that I want to make clear about this is that when we're talking about the changes in adaptability, so health would be the ability to absorb an insult, so to speak, throughout any of the multi subsystems, right? And so this would be sort of like the ballpark average kind of a situation where there's enough adaptability that it would absorb anything and therefore would not take you into an extreme. When we're talking about something that would be performance related, we're intentionally reducing the adaptability of a system to arrive at a performance related outcome. So let me give you a for instance. So we got a high level sprinter that we're working with, and one of the worst things you could probably do would be to restore full relative motion with the intention of trying to maintain that in that circumstance, because from a high level performance standpoint, they need extremely high force production in a very limited time frame to run as fast as humanly possible. To do that, there's no way that we could do that with full relative motion. So we're intentionally taking away some of this adaptability in some way, shape, or form to arrive at the performance related outcome. If we look at an injury situation, we would also see a reduction in adaptability, but this might be unintentional. And so what we have to recognize is that the two ends of the continuum are right next to each other, the two extremes. So this is actually why the circle becomes an excellent representation of that, because if we cross over the line in a performance-related situation and we cross over too far, we actually might take something away that was essential to maintain some measure of health. And so this is why I've created it this way, so you can kind of see that these things are really, really close to one another. And that's why we have to be careful in a performance-related environment that we don't take away too much, because we'll see the same representations that we'll see in people with low adaptability that are dealing with a pain-related issue or a structural change that we would qualify as an injury. So it makes it a little bit, I hesitate to say unique, because I don't necessarily think that anything is terribly unique, but it's a much stronger representation for me as far as understanding why we could take somebody too far into performance. So this will be a situation where, okay, so we drive increase in force production in an athlete, and in doing so, we would take them too far in a direction where they would gain a tremendous amount of force producing capabilities, but in doing so, we take away too much relative motion that they would need to protect themselves in a certain situation, or to be able to absorb energy in a situations like if I go into a cut, I have to be able to absorb energy, and then to come out of the cut, I have to be able to produce that energy. And so if I take away that force absorbing capability to too great a degree, I'm actually compromising their ability to not only to perform, but to protect themselves against higher forces. So again, it's like, I think this makes it a little bit unique. Again, hesitating to use that word.
Yeah, and it's, there's been other people to talk about this type of continuum before. It's like the people that, reference how like the way that you train someone and the way that you treat someone can be very similar. You can use the same sort of principles, and you should use the same principles in order to do these things, so they can kind of just play into each other, and you sort of swing the pendulum one way or another. But if you want someone to exist in the maximum degree in both realms, it's probably not going to happen. but you want to try to allow them to have the adaptability to kind of swing between both. Is just
Well,
lose
we
the
have a pool
relative
of
motions
resources.
for the
Yeah.
high performance reasons, and then regain the relative motions for like the recovery and
Right.
the longevity reasons.
We have a pool of resources, and there are limits, and we have to respect that. And so this is why, like, this is one of those issues associated with any type of programming. So you would have like maybe times of year where something is infinitely more important than something else is, and then you have to monitor for those changes so that they don't exceed a certain level. So your key performance indicators have to stay within a certain range to optimize performance, and then minimize the unfortunate negative consequences. And again, this comes into an understanding of what we're actually talking about when we're talking about these consequences. Like, not every adaptation is necessarily favorable in all circumstances. So we can't say that, okay, all you need to do is just get your athlete stronger. It's like, well, how strong is strong enough under these circumstances? And we need to determine what that actually means. Because if we exceed something, then we're going to take away something that's important, or we'll find them incapable of restoring the resources sufficiently for the next exposure, if you will, whether it be like a game or a practice or a training session.
Yeah, or just the point at which they're at in their season. So if we're going to use we use the more performance facing side of things with like an athlete. If I have an athlete coming off like a really intense postseason, their team, in their sport, if it was an individual or team sport, say it made it, they went the distance, they were in the finals of whatever league that they were in, they played the maximum amount of games, they had the maximum amount of practice time. That person, when they come to see me after that season, if I've trained them well and they've prepared themselves well, they might feel pretty okay. But that's going to be like the stiffest that person is, and the least display of relative motions that athlete's going to give me throughout the year is going to be at that moment. And that's when my training needs to shift to kind of regaining that stuff, because that's the cost. You always pay a price, right? You have to like rob Peter to pay Paul when it comes to the performance stuff. So it's like I've pushed someone all the way into a very like late propulsive representation. They're going to be very stiff, very oriented for their sport. So a lot of things will be laid back and oriented in positions that allow them to perform at a very high level. So that's when I want to try to adjust those things. When early off season, I have time away from practice, away from competitive games that matter, where I can maybe lose some velocity on a throw, or I can maybe lose some accuracy to what they were doing in order to kind of reclaim this health, this adaptability, this recoverability that I've lost.
Exactly. And so on the outside, it's a very simple concept. The execution then becomes where the complexity lies, and it requires, understanding measurement, understanding what representation is ideal for performance, and then how far away from that can I take them to recapture again the health side of the perspective. And so, when we're talking about health, we're not just talking about recovery from performance. This is where, we're going to recoup a lot of these relative measures in the rehab setting. So, if I take somebody that has crossed over the midline of this continuum and unfortunately has lost enough adaptability that we're on the unintended consequence, then everything should be directed towards that recovery of the highest level of adaptability first. Because in many cases, if we said that we have 12 subsystems, we can't really tell to what degree how much of each of those subsystems is an influence. And so this is a situation where we're going to go for a maximum amount of adaptability, because we have to let their system sort of solve the problem. We give them every opportunity, we give them all the resources that are necessary, and we let the systems do what those systems do in as far as recovering from whatever insult. So we're talking about immune system, we're talking about cardiovascular, we're talking literally every subsystem will have some measure of influence, and we can't really predict nor know to the fullest degree, especially in circumstances that we're talking about, like in a rehab or a performance related realm. We have limitations on what we can know. And so again, we have to give them the greatest degree of adaptability. And then if we're moving back towards the performance side of the continuum, that's where we can start to monitor and start to influence how we're going to manage those resources to again, result in the performance related outcome.
Yeah. And I think understanding, so the word performance, although we have this health and performance continuum, it's still understanding that like KPIs, so key performance indicators, relate to both ends of this continuum. And I think people
Absolutely.
understanding that at every point in this process, in this journey, I know you don't really like talking about the journey, but if we're on this sort of vector, because it's not about the destination, right? It's about like the vector that we're on and like, are we progressing?
Destination.
Yeah, there's no fixed points. It's 4-dimensional.
It doesn't end.
It's time and space constantly flowing, ebbing and flowing. But yes. Knowing that like at different points of your season, at different points in the rehab process, there are reasonable key performance indicators to have. You're not always going to be able to chase like these specific things. So if I have someone who's post-surgical, I have an expectation of like what the limitations will be right away. And then I can have an expectation of what the limitations should or should not be 6 months from now and a year from now, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Trying to always have someone live in this world of like health key performance indicators versus their performance key performance indicators, it's not reasonable. So it's a good example would be like if I have a short sprinter in track and field who is peaking for their sprinting events, that might be a time of year where their resting heart rate is elevated over what I would want it to be in their off-season period. So say I want it to be below 60, I would love it to be like, 50 or below, to be like, as an indicator to me, a key performance indicator to me that this person has like a well-functioning aerobic endurance system, whatever you want to call it. But when competition time comes around, I don't want to be like trying to serve both of these masters of having like tremendous aerobic capacity, but also being like very sprint dominant. Because those aren't the same. Those aren't going to be the same things.
Well, so if you looked at this from like just a variability standpoint, it's a state of lower variability. Like we have intentionally narrowed what is possible in regards to how a system will behave, because we're trying to get a very specific outcome. And again, that's not necessarily driven by health. This just kind of popped into my head. All these little performance monitoring devices that
I was just thinking about that too. HRV.
Well, it's like, yeah, okay. So you ever, here's one of those things. It's like, and everybody says they're in the red or whatever. It's like, my HRV's in the red. It's like, that might be the day that you PR in a back squat in the gym, or it might be the day that you jump the highest, or it might be the day that you run the fastest ever, because you have a reduced measure of adaptability and it is favorable for a performance related outcome. It's not necessarily health. And so, those people that are waiting around for, like the green light, so to speak, it's like, it's not necessarily the case. Like this is one of those situations where you have to understand how data works over time.
Right.
You can't look at you can't look at the singular piece of data. You have to look at trends, and you have to understand how your trends work. And this is just part of the training process when we're talking about performance or health or whatever. It's like
what you're saying,
all of that is useful. It's useful, but again, it's like understand is like when to apply certain elements of this thing, depending on the desired outcome.
And that data exists. I don't know the specific research, but people that are in the red on their certain device, those are the times when they perform the best. Because it's like you're saying, like,
absolutely,
if I need to, have laser focus and produce force very instantaneously in one space, and I want to be compressed to do that, like maybe having a day where you didn't sleep too well and your adrenaline levels are super high, cortisol levels are super high, your body is stressed and ready to run from the tiger. That might be what you need. Now, if you always live in that state, there will be a secondary negative consequence. But
Right.
That's what peaking.
Right.
That's what peaking is. Like when they talk about like stepwise peaking and ways to taper athletes, there is a certain school of thought about tapering someone down and then going back up towards competition. And that, in my experience, has been the way that
Absolutely.
I've had the most success with my athletes in the past. Is anytime I've tried early on when we tried to taper down to competition, they would always come out flat. So if it's like the first game of a tournament or it's the first round of competition for this athlete, they come out flat and they kind of like build their way up in competition. But that's not a risk that you should be willing to take. Like what you want to try to do is ramp that system back up, because people do get very caught up with like load management and trying to make sure that they're like in the green all the time. Like that's not the goal. It's your ability.
No.
What's your bandwidth?
Right.
Yeah.
You look at, I just look at this as a distance measure on the continuum. So if you put yourself right at the top arrow of performance, like it is your ultimate level of performance, and then you take the distance that it takes to get to full health. Like if there was such a thing, if we could actually truly say we have full health, right? Okay. If I recover you so far towards full health, it's like the amount of time, literally the amount of time that it would take to build up the output to get back to the point where you could generate maximum performance. There's not enough time to do it. It's just too great a distance. And so if you're too rested, it's like your system can't even generate the amount of energy output that you would need for your maximum performance. And so that's what we're talking about. It's like there's a tuning process here that keeps you close enough to your performance related outcome that it is easy for you to meet that when you need to. It's like, so you take people too far away from performance. It's like, that's how you slow, I was talking about the sprinter example. You get full relative motion on a sprinter the day of the race. Guess what? It's probably not going to be the best race.
Yeah. I don't want them to be relaxed. Yeah. Here's a really good example.
Exactly right.
So our friend Pat Davidson is in a bodybuilding show. I'll post a picture of him shredded on stage if anyone wants to see it in the podcast. But
it was amazing. He was amazing.
He messed up. So it was his first show. So he messed up his timing with his food on the last day. So he was a little bit soft, and he knew he messed up because in the morning he had really good range of motion. So it was just like he wasn't. Yeah. So he's like, I'm moving too good this morning. Like instead of being like stiff and swollen, but that's like a awesome. Good, like, yeah, it's, when that was him being too far on like that health side of things. And he needed to be able to bring it on stage and be like completely, squeezed to bejesus.
Yeah. That's a great example. Wow.
Yeah.
Especially
but that's
for Pat.
Right.
Yeah,
to be like, oh man, my hips feel loose. not a good sign. You want to cartwheel into that place. Be so pressed from
it's like you got to be primed. You're priming the system. You're priming the system for readiness, and you can be too recovered. Like you could be out of that zone where you're just not ready. And nor are you capable of being ready. And that's the concern that you run into there. Because then if you put yourself in that situation where like you do need a quick reaction, you do need high force production, and you can't do it, now you've actually, you've most likely increased the risk of injury.
Yeah. And it's, I think another thing to understand is
you're going to do it some way, shape, or form.
The model that you use and the model that you offer is the aspects of the model are coherent enough between the health and performance side that it doesn't become such a chore. Like, we're talking about that distance being like pretty far away, but we can bridge that gap relatively quickly, or quicker than we could if we were using like completely separate systems. So it's like, we're still talking about the same ways to move. We're still talking about activities that are probably similar, but might have different components of force, just represented through like rates or magnitude. Like I don't know if we've actually ever talked about the 7 components of force. I'll throw it on the screen.
Magnitude, location, direction, duration, frequency, variability, and rate.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah, it's just rote memorization. Bill's got that in his back pocket, ready to go.
I can only say them in one. I can only say them in that order, though.
Yeah, you can't. If I started with magnitude, you wouldn't be able to do the rest.
I would be all over the place.
Yeah, but anyways, like knowing that those things are always going to be, it's the whole vertical integration. It's a Charlie Francis thing. It's just like we're always working on all of these things. It's just that what are we tuning? What are we working on more? What are we focused on in any given phase of what we're doing?
Right. Absolutely.
And you can't always be maximizing health and maximizing performance at the same time. A really good, I think my final example would be like the recon program is a really good example of that. Is like early on, if people are really into like training like an athlete, training for competition, always going balls to the wall with their training, it's a big departure from that, because that distance that they've created is it's huge. It's just the amount that you have to change to be on this health end of the continuum, and the amount of time that you're going to need to commit to being over there might be much more than you're expecting or want to do.
Yeah, to give you a little bit of an example, like if we were starting, like say, a young athlete from scratch, and you think about like how soon you would implement some measure of specificity. It's like a limited number of sports, and then like how would you drive training? If you go like to a book like Science and Practice of Strength Training, and you're gonna read a statement in there that's going to talk about like a 3-year period of development before you would even reach a point where your training would become like narrowed and specific, because they understand that if you try to take this away too soon, you actually limit potential. Like the overall potential of that athlete can be limited by not addressing some of the more broader scope elements of training, like literally just learning how to train is an element of training. And a lot of people try to go too quickly because everything is urgent, and there are some things that could be changed very, very quickly. From an aesthetic standpoint, from a fat loss perspective, like a lot of those things can be changed very, very quickly. But again, there's a narrowing of adaptability that people drive themselves into, not intentionally. It's unintended. Like everybody wants the favorable adaptations, but they don't understand what the secondary consequences are that take things away. And that's why Recon now exists, is because it's for those people that have always had this situation arise, where it's like, I try to move myself in one direction and I always hit that same obstacle that interferes with me making progress. And then it either shows up as, something that interferes with movement. Some people end up with like legitimate structural issues. And we want to make sure that people understand that it's like there is a way that we can progress you into these things that you desire, but there's some prerequisites that exist. And like I said, so that's why Recon exists as it does.
Yeah, it's a way to, instead of trying to use everyone trying to look for a performance-based solution for what they're looking for. This is more of like a health to performance based solution. So we take a step, this important step backwards, which is just a step forwards, as we all know. Because Mike Camperini, there is no backwards. He doesn't watch this. He'll never see it. There's no way. But there's no way that Mike Camperini. Somebody will tell him.
I'm gonna get a text. There'll be no question. I'll get a text. Like it'll find its way. It's like you can't say anything.
Yeah,
anymore.
Long Wong, real person, will not a fake person. Hashtag long time. He'll let him know for us because he's watching still.
There you go.
All right.
He's watching all the way through.
I think we wrapped that up. That was. We shamelessly promoted the network and then talked about the health and performance continuum. That's the namesake of the model and the network. And there you go. Thanks for watching, everybody. And
thanks for watching.
We'll see you in the network.
We'll see you on the network. Yeah.